Welcome to Learning in Action's Heal the Divide Podinar series. Today, our theme is coaching the client's self rather than their parts. And our guest is Dr. Richard Schwartz, who I'll give a proper introduction to in just a moment. Hi, I'm Allison Whitmire with Learning in Action. I'm joined by my colleague, Sarah Bush. Hey, Sarah.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So our mission at Learning in Action is to heal the divide. And in an IFS framework, it's about heal the ways in which we're divided from ourselves, heal the ways in which the parts are running the bus, and reconnect with the self. Because our belief is that when we can be self-led, that we will heal what divides us from each other. So what the heck's a Podinar? A Podinar is a combination of a podcast and a webinar. It's interview style like a podcast and interactive, we hope, like a webinar. I'm pleased to talk about what we're going to get into today. So Dick is going to be providing an overview of the internal family systems model. That'll be about the first 15 to 20 minutes. Doesn't need any back and forth from me. And so that'll be Dick presenting that piece so that we all have a grounding and understanding of what is this that we're talking about. And then we'll probably ask a few questions, mainly to kind of work with the energy, move some energy around. And then we're going to go into a live demonstration of IFS, but with me as the client. And so my parts are pretty excited about that. So we're going to discuss also how a coach might use some of the aspects of this model in their coaching and talk about what it might mean to coach the client's self rather than their parts and what the effectiveness of that might be. And then explore, many coaches can have some discomfort around using kind of what might be called a therapeutic model with what not be called is a therapeutic model and use it in a coaching context. So we'll explore some of those, potential concerns or challenges. And that is our agenda for today. So with that, I'm so excited to introduce Dr. Richard Schwartz. He began his career as a systemic family therapist and an academic. Grounded in systems thinking, Dr. Schwartz developed internal family systems in response to clients' descriptions of various parts within themselves. He focused on the relationship among these parts and noticed that there were systemic patterns to the way they were organized across clients. And he found that when clients' parts felt safe and were allowed to relax, clients would experience spontaneously the qualities of confidence and openness and compassion that Dr. Schwartz came to call the self. He found that when in that state of self, clients would know how to heal their parts. So a featured speaker for national professional organizations, author of this fabulous new book, I hope you'll check out, No Bad Parts. We'll talk more about that later. Dr. Schwartz has published many books. I really love the audiobooks because I can digest them in a variety of settings. And anyway, lots of articles about IFS. So without any further ado, that was a lot of ado. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Allison. I feel very welcome. You're just a lovely host. I love how you know everybody. It seems like a very tight community. So it's something that you've created, you guys, you and Sarah, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited to be on and honored. And it sounds like you know IFS pretty well.
A little bit.
Okay. And I'm happy to introduce it in the 15 minutes that you mentioned. So should I jump in?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay. So as Allison read, my background is as a family therapist. So I was steeped in systems thinking, and I was actually one of those obnoxious family therapists that thought we'd found the Holy Grail and that people who were mucking around in the intrapsychic world were wasting their time, because we could change all that by just changing some external relationships. And I held that belief until I tested it, made the mistake of doing an outcome study, and found that I could reorganize the families just the way the book said to do it, and still these bulimic clients we were doing this with kept binging and purging. And so out of frustration, I began asking why, and they started talking this language of parts, which was foreign to me at the time, because I thought, I just have one mind and a bunch of different thoughts and emotions. But they were talking about these parts as if they had a lot of autonomy and could make them do things they didn't want to do, and would get into fights with each other. And at first I got scared and thought maybe these kids are sicker than I thought, until I really listened inside myself, and oh my God, I've got them too. And mine are very similar in some ways. And then I got intrigued, and I began to quiz my clients about their inner systems. And I was lucky to have a few incredibly articulate about it, and taught this to me. I basically learned this model from my clients. And what I learned, and I'm going to skip through a bunch of the mistakes and the phases, but mainly what I learned is that, number one, we all have these parts, that it's the natural state of the mind to have parts, to be subdivided this way. I liked your initial picture, because it looks like a bunch of cogs in a machine, which the word part does kind of conjure, but it's inadequate, because what I've found with the parts is that they are full-range personalities, and that people, for example, who have the diagnosis of multiple personality disorder, now called DID, aren't so different from the rest of us, except that their system got blown apart such that they have these amnesic barriers between these different parts. But the idea that they're full-range personalities is pretty much the same. And that is a different paradigm from the way most of us have thought about ourselves. But it turns out to be a very empowering paradigm, because it turns out that all of them have wonderful qualities and resources to lend to us and to help us thrive in our lives. And that trauma and what are called attachment injuries, the bad parenting, forces them out of their naturally valuable states into roles that can be extreme, and they are also frozen in time during the trauma also. So they still think you, Allison, are 5 years old, and they have to protect you in the way they did back then. And so in that state, they can actually be quite damaging in our lives. And so a lot of the work is just helping clients focus on them, and instead of the usual fighting with them or trying to get rid of them or allowing them to take over and do something destructive, just get curious and begin to ask them questions. And to most everybody's amazement, the answers start coming. And you'll learn about the secret history of how whatever part it is got forced into the role it's in and doesn't like that role, but thinks it's absolutely necessary because something tragic would happen if it didn't keep doing this. So so that's what I learned from these clients. And I also learned that they tend to organize across client in similar ways. So I had a long run with a lot of trauma clients. And as a systems guy, I began trying to figure out what are the distinctions and the patterns here. And the main distinction that leaped out immediately was between parts that what you might call your inner children, who before they get hurt are playful and creative and loving and open and vulnerable and sensitive. And because they are so sensitive, they're the ones who get hurt the most by the betrayals or the slings and arrows. and they take in what I'm going to call burdens, which the definition of which is extreme beliefs and emotions that entered your system from those experiences. And these extreme beliefs and emotions attach to these parts almost like a virus. And after one of these inner children gets burdened that way, their whole organization is around that extreme belief or emotion. They tend to operate with that. And then they have the power to make us feel, even years later, that same emotion, and can overwhelm us if they feel the need to, and make it so we can't function. And so most of us, after being traumatized or having a bad experience of some kind, will try to lock those parts away inside in inner basements or abysses or cysts, and try desperately to avoid anything that might trigger them. So we call those parts the exiles, because inside they are exiles. And you moved on from them thinking all you were doing was moving on from the memories, sensations, emotions, and beliefs of the trauma, not realizing in the process you were locking away your most precious qualities a lot of the time. And then you become dominated by another set of parts who are desperately trying to keep these exiles from being hurt or triggered, and also keep them contained. So we call those parts protectors. And again, I'm just talking about the roles they're forced into, not the essence of who these parts are. And some protectors are trying to manage your life so that nothing happens that might trigger your exile. So they might manage your relationships so no one gets close enough to hurt you, manage your appearance so that you never get rejected, manage your performance so that you get a lot of accolades to counter the worthlessness. So they're working constantly. They're the ones that got you in your good jobs, got you through graduate school. They're in your head a lot of the time. They keep you from feeling too much by keeping you in your head. So we call these managers. Some of them, particularly in women and people in my profession, make you take care of everybody else and not take care of yourself, and so on and so on. They're just trying to keep you safe and keep these exiles from being triggered. Despite their best intentions, the world has a way of triggering your exiles anyway, which is a big crisis, a big emergency. And so another set of parts immediately goes into action to get you higher than those flames of raw emotion from the exiles, or to douse them with some substance, or to distract you until they burn themselves out. So we call those protectors firefighters. So it's a very simple map. It's really just three classes of parts: exiles, and then two kinds of protectors, managers and firefighters. And again, these are the extreme roles that parts are forced into, not who they become when they leave these roles. Because they can, and when they do leave the roles, they'll transform into their naturally valuable states. So that's a lot of what IFS is about, is helping people not just notice and observe in a mindful way and be accepting of these parts, but actively starting to help them transform. And I stumbled onto another big discovery, for lack of a better word, just simply through trial and error, because as a family therapist, I was trying to have my clients have better dialogues with these parts. And once I got hip to the fact they're not what they seem and they deserve to be listened to, I was trying to get my clients to listen to them and be curious about them and explore all this. And as I was doing that, I would find that a client would suddenly become furious with the part. Like maybe I was trying to have Allison talk to her critic, and she was started out okay, but suddenly she's angry at the critic, and the critic gets defensive, and they're fighting. And as a family therapist, in family sessions, when you try to have two people talk to each other and one of them gets extreme, sometimes they're being cued from somebody else, from a third party, that they disagree with the other person, siding against the other person. And we were taught to get that person, that third party, to step back in the room out of the person's line of vision. And when that happens, they would calm down and they have a decent conversation. I started thinking maybe the same thing's happening in this inner world. As I'm trying to have my client talk to the critic, maybe some part that hates the critic has come in. And so I would ask clients to get those parts to step out. And as they did, because they said they could, suddenly they would become a different person. And that person who would emerge would know how to relate to the critic or any other part from a place of compassion and curiosity and calm and confidence. And the part would respond and would soften and would start to tell its story. And how it was forced into the role it was in, and also with the other parts that in the system that it was protecting. And as we got that information, we could negotiate permission to go to the exile it was protecting. And then I learned over time about a 5-step process for literally healing the exile it was protecting, which then freed up that protector to no longer have to do that job. So that's a very nutshell-y version of both the theory and the practice. But I do want to save time to do a demonstration of some of that with Allison.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that was a super helpful overview. A question came up, and I'm so really appreciating Michael for doing some quick answers for the group. But one thing a question that came up that I'd love for you to just address a little bit more fully is this question of like are parts created by trauma? And I've heard you say before that we come into this life with I don't know, potentiated parts, or could you just kind of speak to the origin of parts?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because the way you think about how they come has a lot to do with how you relate to them. So there is, in my mind, a myth in the trauma world that they're created by the trauma, that the unitary mind gets fragmented into these mini minds. And that means the existence of parts is pathologized. So I'm really a crusader against that belief. And what I not only believe, but have found over and over is that what I was saying earlier, that we come into the world with them either dormant or, manifest. And infant researchers like Barry Brazelton will talk about 5 discrete states that infants rotate through. So those are the ones online when you're born, and then as you develop, others come in on time, but they come in and they're there to help us in our life. So they're not pathologized. They're valuable. And like kids in a family, in a dysfunctional family, they're forced into roles that they're not designed for, they hate. They become like what we call in family therapy parentified inner children, in a sense. They're forced to take on responsibility they're not equipped to handle. These protective parts are. And then others get exiled. So yeah, that's an important question. I'm glad that was asked.
Yeah, I even, not to get too tangential, but not using these words, but I even feel like I've heard Stanislav Grof talk about like parts in utero.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've done that kind of retrieval where we've had to go back into the womb and get some parts out of there.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like, how about we go into the demo, and I feel like lots more questions will come up from there. I'm not seeing anything else really major come up in the chat box. And so what I'm going to invite us to do during the demo is to have everyone's camera go off so that I won't feel like I have so many eyes on me. And I'm going to fix my camera view. So I'm just looking at Dick. And a couple of things, I may do some breathe, like a lot of breathing through this, and that's okay. I'm fine. I might cry, and that's okay too. I've got my hanky, so I'm good.
Well, I'm good too. So,
Okay,
should we begin?
I'm ready.
Okay, so did you have something in mind to work on, Allison?
I do. When you and I met the first time, and we had this initial conversation, I could feel a really strong part of me kind of going like, get out of there, and found myself kind of rushing. And so there's a part there I'd like to start with, and I suspect other parts will want to get in on the action.
Okay, that sounds good. So, let's go ahead and focus on that feeling of wanting to get out of there and being pulled. Yeah, notice where you find it right now in your body. I can see you're feeling it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, kind of where I'm feeling it is like that old vaudeville hook, like stage,
Yeah,
like
good.
that, like
Good,
that's
good.
how. Mm-hmm.
And as you notice it there, how do you feel toward it?
So, I, so there's another part that's blocking.
Blocking the hook?
Don't look there.
Don't look at the hook?
Don't look at the person. Don't look at the.
Okay.
Don't look there.
Yeah. So don't look at me, it's saying, or what's it saying?
No, like don't look at that other part.
Okay, so got it. Okay. So we might want to start with that one that doesn't want you to look.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you find it in your body or around your body?
It's in, my chest.
Okay. How do you feel toward it?
Yeah, curious and appreciative, because
Okay, good.
I feel its intention.
And is it giving you that intention? Ask it what it's trying to protect you from or why it doesn't want you to look.
This part is protecting me from feeling too much.
Any particular feeling it's worried about?
I think it's more afraid of me being overwhelmed, almost overwhelmed by compassion,
By compassion.
by overwhelmed by the feelings of the other.
The feeling of another person or another part?
And in this case, this other part.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Does that make sense to you, Allison?
It feels very familiar.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe ask this one how old it thinks you are, and don't think of the answer. Just wait and see what comes to you.
Oh yeah, it's bigger than me. It thinks it's bigger than me.
Uh-huh.
Taller, bigger, more
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Okay. How are you feeling toward it as you get that?
Yeah, just appreciative.
Okay. Let it know. It sounds like it's been trying to keep you away from this for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been trying to protect me.
Okay. And do you feel like you need its protection? Is this something that you really are afraid to look at or feel?
No, I think I'm okay.
So maybe let it know that. Let it know maybe you're older than when it got this job, and just see how it reacts to that information.
It's like I just grew. It's like,
So
I don't know, it's like I just grew and it's going, oh, oh, yeah.
okay, good. So how would it feel now if we went with the hook?
Yeah, it feels okay. It's like, okay, all right, it's okay. You got this.
All right, good. All right, so return your focus to that.
Okay,
And how would it feel now to go where it wants you to go?
it's okay.
So let it know you're ready.
Okay,
And, I'll be right with you, and let's just see where it takes you.
okay. Yeah. There's a little girl who is hiding in a corner, and she's the one that pulls the hook.
Okay. How do you feel toward her as you see her there?
I feel sad.
Sad for her, or you feel her sadness?
I feel sad for her.
Okay, good. So let her know that. And do you have a sense of how close you are to her or distant?
A little further than arm's length.
Okay. And how's she reacting to your compassion?
Hmm. She's still hiding. She's still scared.
So she's afraid of you even.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now we're not going to do anything but try to earn some trust with her in whatever way feels right to you. So just see how you want to do that.
I'm sitting down on the floor with her.
Great.
She's looking up. Yeah. She's ready to talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what she wants you to know. And by the way, you don't have to share with us what she tells you if you don't want to. It's up to you.
She feels like she's protecting me from being seen.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
That,
ask about, yeah, go ahead.
that somehow, yeah, somehow it's not safe for
Yeah.
other people to see me.
Okay. Are you open to knowing why she carries that fear?
I am.
Okay. So tell her you're ready to know where she got this fear in the past. And again, don't think of the answer, just wait and see what comes to you.
Mm. Mm. Lots of uh, lots of worry about not being right, not being um, kind of good enough, not being enough, not being um, in that, like not being afraid. Yeah,
Is all that making sense to you?
it does.
So let her know you're getting that, that there were lots of different scenes and incidents where she got the message that she better not be seen because she'll be judged, it sounds like, as not good enough or things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's worse than that somehow. But yeah,
Well, let's stay with it because we want to really get it.
it's
Yeah, we
almost
really,
like she wouldn't exist.
uh-huh,
It's somehow worse than all of that. It's somehow it's
yeah,
like it's not like being annihilated.
uh-huh, okay.
Um, yeah.
So let her know you get that the fear is that deep and big, and ask a little more about why it felt so much like she might be annihilated.
Mm, yeah. Losing something's blocking.
Okay, so we'll respect that. Some part isn't ready for you to know that piece, and
Mhm.
that's, especially in the time we have, we're going to respect that.
Okay.
Um, but just focus on the block for 1 second
Hmm.
and ask it what it's afraid would happen if you saw the rest of it.
Mm. Yeah. It's about what else I would have to feel that the little girl feels.
So there's some other feeling it's afraid to let you feel also.
Hmm.
Okay. And what's it afraid would happen if you felt that?
Like it would be too much. Like it would.
Yeah,
It thinks it would. That would be. That I would not have the capacity to.
handle it.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe ask it how old it thinks you are.
It doesn't know and it doesn't care.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're going to respect its pace, but maybe sort of like you did with the other one, just do let it know who you are because it may not know and that you can handle more than it thinks, if that's true.
Okay. It's
How's it react?
yeah. It's stepping back.
Okay, well, this probably isn't the place to take the next step, given the time constraints, but let the girl know that you get there's more she needs to share with you, and that you're going to find a time to go with her there and see how that is for her.
Yeah. She's liking that.
Okay, and in the meantime, why don't you go into that time period and be with her in the way she needed somebody, even if we don't know everything that happened?
Hmm.
Just tell me when you're in there with her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How are you being with her?
I'm holding her.
How's she reacting?
No, just, I'm just
Some
trembling,
relief.
but better, like better.
You're good. Yeah. And if she'd like to, we could take her out of that time period to a safe place until you're ready to go back with her and see what else happened. Or she can just stay there. It's really her call.
She's open to being carried somewhere else.
All right. So it could be right there in your house where you are with you, or it could be a fantasy place of her choice.
Yeah, she knows where she wants to go.
All right. So let's take her there.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay.
She likes it?
Yeah, we're hammock swinging.
Okay, good. So you're there with her. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell her she doesn't have to go back there until she's ready to show you the rest, and you're going to take care of her this way until then, and after that.
Okay. Yeah, she's good with that.
She's good with that?
Doesn't necessarily love that corner of the room.
No, I can imagine. All right, so let's bring in these protectors and have them see how she's doing now, and just see if they want to say anything or have any reaction.
They're good. They're a little surprised. And they're a little embarrassed, but I suspect that's a different part.
They're embarrassed by what you shared, or what are they embarrassed about?
No, embarrassed that they've been doing all this protection and maybe they didn't need to.
Yeah, well, it's something for them to think about, and you can ask them if they could really trust they didn't need to do this protection, what might they like to do inside of you instead?
Yeah, they're saying they're going to need to get back to me.
Okay, yeah, they can think about it.
Yeah.
And, you haven't fully healed this little girl yet, too, so it's likely they won't totally drop their weapons until that's complete.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let them know you get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does that feel complete for now?
It does. It does. It feels resolved, light and resolved.
Okay. So thank your parts for doing this, especially in this context.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, you're coming back to a group that you're leading.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm back.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
I feel good. I feel good. I kind of thought I would be disoriented, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not.
Good. Good. Good.
Yeah.
I can see in the chat a lot of accolades, so I hope you get to read them.
Thank you. So, yes, everyone can turn your camera back on. Please join us if you'd like. So, what are you, if you want to raise your virtual hand, I can imagine you want to kind of maybe let that sit inside you a little bit. And if you'd like to reflect a question or a curiosity or anything is coming up for you about what happened, Pamelia. Yeah, question.
I found it fascinating, and I found that while I was listening to some of my parts bringing me information or saying things to me, and that was very interesting. But my question was, and I threw it in the chat, but I think it scrolled by, is that how do we as coaches incorporate IFS into our practice without delving too far into therapy? That's
Really good question. Yeah. And that's something we've struggled with because we do want to start training coaches in this, and we're in the process of designing a curriculum. And some of where we've landed has been that for coaches, it's safe to work with protectors of clients and maybe not go to these inner children, that the piece of work that Allison and I just did, without at least consultation from a therapist or some kind of collaboration. And the reasoning is, while there are lots and lots of people like Allison who you could do what I just did and it would probably be fine, there are also a percentage of people that have pretty severe trauma and would have, it's just tricky. It's good to have some therapeutic training to work with that population, and you don't know in advance who's who is the problem. So we're going to err on the safe side probably and encourage coaches to stay with protectors. And there's a whole lot you can do just at that level.
Yeah, I'll just, thanks for the question, Pamelia, and I'll just double down on that. For me, as I've just begun experimenting, incorporating this a little bit, simply helping your clients notice their different parts. Oh, part of you is feeling this and part of you is feeling that. Like that alone has value. Like,
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah, that by itself, not only noticing them, but realizing they're not your enemy and actually learning to be loving of them it's a big shift for most people. And then the other side of it that I didn't mention is helping your coachees. I'm not sure what you call them. Do you call them coachees?
Coachees or clients, either way.
Okay. Helping them access that self I was talking about. And if you're coaching them in a corporate context or, just in a life context, knowing how to access those qualities and then living their life much more from that place, and then noticing when parts come in and interfere with that, and then helping the parts trust that it is safe to let you stay, because as was illustrated in our work, most of these protectors still think you're quite young and they don't trust you can handle things. And once they realize how much you can handle, they're so relieved and they're just thrilled to have somebody like you run your life. So drive the bus. Yeah.
So the other things I've done, and Dick, you'll have to, feel free to like, that's too far. But one of the things that I've done is when a client notices a part, I'll ask the question, what does that part of you want you to know?
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself has been really valuable for clients.
That's exactly right. That simple question, and sometimes you have to be a little more directive, and as I was, and say, Allison, focus on that part. Find it in your body. That's always helpful to have people find an anchor point for it, and then direct the question right there. What does it want you to know? And often you'll get a little more clarity that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty simple. It's like
It's
1,
super
2,
simple.
3.
It's
Just
super
have,
simple.
yeah.
And even so I don't go any further than, what does it want you to know? What is it afraid would happen if it didn't do what it does?
That's right.
And or what is it protecting you from? And I don't go any further than that, because I don't feel like it's like I have the ability to, or at least that it's appropriate for me to. And just those alone, along with like, where is it in your body? And I integrate some mindfulness techniques in that, and it's had some powerful consequences for my clients.
The other question I think is safe for you to add would be what I used, which was ask this part how old it thinks you are. And if it thinks you're young, just update it and see how it reacts. Because as you can see, that had an impact. And and then there's always this sort of general question for protectors, which is ask this part what it needs from you going forward. Really good
Yes.
question for those parts. Yeah.
So for those of you that are coaches, and a whole bunch of you are, I just really encourage you to get Dick's book. Dick has some courses for coaches that are kind of more on demand. I think I'm in one of them. And even if you do nothing more than integrate some of these really basic questions, it's been transformative to some of me and my coaching clients. Who else has questions? Henry, do you still have a question?
Yeah, it partly got answered in the latest discussion. I actually recently took the EQ profile and discovered that I had deeply buried some traumas that I had not really realized they were part of the story, and kind of hit a low point. But I had also then attended Richard's webinar previously about this, and so I just went to the different parts I could recognize, when I was 4, when I was 6.5, when I was 12, and each one of those had sort of traumatic things that happened. And what I without knowing anything more, I just went in and introduced myself to my parts and said, hey, I'm here. I love you. You're part of me. Need anything from me right now? And then when they said, no, it's nice to know you're there, and said, well, I will be with you and be here if you ever need me. So come get me when you need me. And it seems safe to do that as opposed to anything else. And I just wanted to pass that on. It was more intuitive than anything else, but it made a big difference.
It's beautiful. I thank you so much for that story. And, I think that is where we're going to land, that because as you work with protectors as a coach, you're going to learn about exiles because they're going to tell you they're protecting these other parts. And so rather than ignoring them until you get to an IFS therapist, I think it's safe to do what Henry did, which is to let them know you see them, you're not going to forget about them, and that you welcome them. And, and just that much also can be very powerful, as you said. And that can be a kind of placeholder until you get to a point where you are with somebody who can take you the other steps.
Thank you. Kathleen, question?
Yes. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the dangers that could arise from working with exiles, and maybe if you had an example, just kind of hammer that point home.
Yeah, sure. So I learned the dangers the hard way when I was starting out, because these clients I mentioned earlier who were teaching it to me would talk about their exiles. And I would think, okay, that's where we need to go, because that's what needs the healing. And I would succeed in the session, and my client would have this big kind of cathartic experience. But then I noticed, because I was now doing this with a number of clients, that shortly after the session, they'd have some big dramatic, what we call backlash experience. I had clients get into a car wreck right after my session and claim they couldn't see the car, or I had a client spike a big fever, or just a variety of ways that their protectors were punishing us for having violated the rules by going to these exiles without permission from the protectors. So we learned that, I learned the hard way to always start with protectors and get permission, which we sort of did, but Allison also, I could tell, had a lot of self, so I felt pretty confident to go to her exile. But yeah, so those are a couple examples, but yeah, so, these are delicate inner ecologies in some cases, and we need to be ecologically sensitive as we go in and learn the rules and get permission.
Thank you. So one of the questions I got, and I can't imagine the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Is there a way to do this at an organizational level? Like, is there a way that you're doing, like, and make it, bigger?
Yeah, we're exploring that. I've got a couple partners now who are fairly prominent organizational type people, and we're trying to figure that out, because I do believe it's all parallel. You could look at an organization this way: who are the exiles, who are the managers, who are the firefighters. You can look at a country this way, as our country is a massive example of that right now. And where's the self, and how can we go into a company and help everybody start to access self and interact from that place rather than from all these parts that they've been in, especially the leaders, because self is contagious, and it'll trickle down from a leader, but also protective parts are also. So those, if your leader is in protectors, it's going to really affect the atmosphere in the country in a big way. I mean, the company. So things like that, those are all things we're talking about.
Right. Reed, do you want to ask your question out loud?
Sure. I think we're all familiar with the inner critic, that concept. Sharmin Shahzad has this concept of saboteurs and sages as the inner voice. How does this all fit with saboteurs and sages?
Yeah, so as with the inner critic, inner saboteurs have a really bad name too in the field, and people are, as far as I know, people are taught to fight with them or ignore them or override them, which is a huge mistake. So there are parts, Allison had this hook which was desperate to not let her show herself. And so as she shows herself, as she got this podcast and so on, she's constantly feeling this hook. That in those circles would be considered an inner saboteur. It turns out it's just a little kid who's terrified of being seen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the title of my book, No Bad Parts. And I've worked not only with those kinds of parts, critics, saboteurs, I've worked with homicidal parts that have killed people, and people in prisons. I've worked with sex offenders and so on. And even those parts, if you open to hear their secret histories, will tell you how they were forced into their roles and the burdens they carry and how they hate what they've done, but they can't stop themselves. So this is a model of total, utter compassion for everything inside of you. And then once you can do that, everything outside of you. So it's radical in that way.
One of the, thank you, Reed. one of the things that that I made me feel so hopeful, that you I've heard you say before, is that everyone you've ever encountered, whether they're sociopaths or like I don't know, maybe hardened criminals, I don't know what, that everyone has a self.
Yeah. Yeah, the only population I've had trouble accessing it with are people with fairly severe brain damage, because it seems like you have to have a certain amount of hardware to have it embody. But for me, self isn't, it's, it's not a psychological concept, it's much more of a spiritual essence that can be in us or is also a field around us. And how we treat our body and how much we unburden allows more of it to be in us. And a lot of my vision is that if we could bring enough self to this planet, things would change very quickly. So that's a lot of what I'm trying to do.
Love that. And so certainly that bringing more self to the planet starts with bringing more self to ourselves.
Exactly.
And that means working with our parts. And I'm curious, other than like being in active dialogue, active relationship with our parts, are there other ways we can activate, be more in ourselves?
Yeah. When we do the trainings, we'll teach people to notice when you're in self and when you're not. So as I came to do this, I forget what you call it, Podinar? Good. I just start by checking in. What are my friendly protectors doing right now? And I can notice them in different places in my body. I've got parts of stress, my forehead. I feel this weight on my shoulders. My heart can be closed. And I'm just noticing all those protectors. And then I'm just reminding them, listen, remember, it always goes better if you trust me. Just let me handle this Podinar. And then I just feel all this opening and release. And instead, my heart is open now. I don't have a big agenda about what happens and how it goes. I feel connected to you, partly because you're so gracious, but just I feel much more open, and I'm checking that all the time. And there's a kind of vibrating energy that runs through my body when I got a lot of self-energy. I'm just checking how's that going, and so I'm feeling all that right now. And also, I mentioned that when people are in self, they have these C-word qualities that I mentioned: calm and curious and compassion. And I think I mentioned confident. And then there are 4 others that characterize that experience, which include clarity and courage and creativity and connectedness. So those are what we call the 8 C's of self-leadership. And I can also notice how much of those qualities am I embodying right now. And if I'm not, it means there's a part that's blocking. So I'm just asking it to give me some space.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very teachable. That you can teach to the people you coach, your coachees.
So we're going to need to bring things to a close. Thank you all for Adam Friedman. Thanks for answering so many of the questions that are coming in the workshop, and you too, Michael, are coming into the chat box. Thank you too, Michael, for answering some of those questions. Just as we finish up here, really hope you order Dick's book, No Bad Parts. He wrote it for everybody, not necessarily therapists. Pick it up. I had a client zoom through it twice and found it so digestible, which is fantastic. I don't know. Do you know where it's going to be out on Audible, Dick? We had a question with that.
I don't know for sure. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I like to consume via Audible too. If you'd like to learn more about how to connect with Dick, go to the website, see what's available. His courses, as you can imagine, are oversubscribed right now. And you can see why. And there's lots of books, there's lots of online opportunities to get involved. He has so many courses through Sounds True, through IFS, lots of books. There's so many ways you can begin to learn more. One of the things that we are offering here in the fall at Learning in Action is a mindful coach certification. This is for people who are already coaches. And it's because I began sensing throughout the pandemic, before I knew about Parts and Self, that I wasn't coaching my client self, that I was just coaching all these firefighting parts, that wasn't, it just wasn't sticking. And so we created this special first, beta mindful coach certification. That's the intention is it's a live online 12-week course. And again, it's taught live, that is about introducing mindfulness techniques into coaching in a seamless way in order to access more of the client's self. So anyway, and if you sign up, we got a discount code for you coming here. So we would love for you to join us. And then one of the things that Henry mentioned somewhere during our conversation here is he talked about taking the EQ profile. That's an instrument that we have that reveals our internal experience under stress. And it tends to kind of, I have language for this now that I didn't have before. It kind of tends to point to our firefighters. What emotions do I access? What are the color of my thoughts? Do I focus on me? Do I focus on the other person? Am I able to read what the other person's thinking, feeling, and wanting? Anyway, that's our flagship course that we've done for years and years and years. It's a 12-week online live course, 49 ICF. That starts in the fall too. We'd love to have you join us.